Thanks for having me. So I'm Alana. I am a fifth year, rising fifth year in the clinical psych program at the University of Rhode Island, doctorate program, sorry. Um, I got my bachelor's in psychology and anthropology from the University of Texas, San Antonio. I got my master's in clinical psych from the University of Houston, Clear Lake. After that, I worked at NASA as a clinician, and then I went back to get my doctorate because I wanted to explore substance use in particular in Pacific Islanders. My research interests have expanded while in grad school, so now I'm looking at substance use, historical trauma, and suicide in Pacific Islanders, which is the focus of my F31. So if you're familiar with health research, the graduate level, like big grant is the F31. So still waiting to hear back if I'm getting year two. We've had some drama at NIH lately, so fingers crossed for me. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about careers in psych, in particular, what you can do after graduating with your bachelor's degree, with a particular focus on like options at the master's and doctoral level. But I can go back and talk about what you can do with a bachelor's in psych if you folks are interested. You can let me know. Let me see if I can bring up the chat. You can also just like interrupt me, raise your hand if you have questions, no worries. From what I understand, this is going to be pretty chill. So just let me know if you have questions. Are we good to get started? Okay,
Yeah. All right.
great. Okay, so starting out with the master's, you can do a variety of things with a master's in psychology. There are different specializations. So you can go into forensic psych, which is basically like the legal version of psych, counseling, and clinical, and I'll explain the difference between those, health, developmental, industrial organizational, which is like a niche one, and then school. So if you specialize in any of those, you can forge your career as a research assistant. Master's level research assistants tend to be the ones that like run the research labs for professors. And you could also be a therapist if you wanted to be a therapist. So like working in a mental health context, providing counseling for people, or you can also teach, particularly at community college with a master's. So if you were to get a master's in clinical psych, I would be, it would prepare you for a variety of careers. So you could do that research assistant job. You could be a licensed mental health therapist. Um, Typically, a master's in clinical psych is 2 to 3 years. I have one. I would definitely recommend that you, if you wanted to be a therapist, and getting a master's in clinical psych, just be mindful of like what the therapist licensure requirements are in your particular area, because sometimes they offer the classes and sometimes they don't. So the kinds of careers that are going to be open to you. Oh, sorry, my dog is barking. Um, the kind of careers that are going to be open to you are kind of dependent on the like design of the school or design of the program. You could go into a more research oriented one and then have more of a research career. You could go into a more clinical oriented one and have a clinical career, so like being a therapist. I would definitely recommend that you be careful about online programs when it comes to therapy careers, just because therapy careers often require you to have like on hands-on learning, like seeing clients in person, and sometimes online programs don't offer that, or they're kind of shady about whether they offer it. So just be very careful about that one. You can also go into counseling psychology. So clinical psychology and counseling psychology kind of are in the same neighborhood, but they're different. Um, so clinical is more of what they call like the medical model, so more diagnosis, more and more, I guess, like rarer mental health struggles. Um, and counseling is more of like a holistic, um, sometimes more social justice oriented field that focuses more on like more common mental health struggles like depression, anxiety. They also do career counseling, so helping people choose careers, focusing more on like life pressures and different things that are going on in the person's life and how that impacts their mental health versus clinical, which is more like, we have a diagnosis, we have a treatment, let's go. Um, Again, definitely recommend that you look at programs in like your local state universities because wherever you want to practice, it's going to be a little bit more tailored to like getting licensure in that state. Always being mindful of like what licensure requires wherever you want to live. Again, 2 to 3 years. You can also do marriage and family therapy and school psychology at the master's level. Marriage and family therapists tend to focus more on, just as it says, the marriage and the family. So couples counseling, family counseling. Typically, if you were to get a master's in counseling psychology, you would be prepped for a career as a therapist. But you can be a therapist in a variety of settings. So in private practice, hospitals, government agencies, schools. When I worked at NASA, my supervisor had a master's and she employed counselors and marriage and family therapists, and they had their own little niche at NASA, helping the people who work there and their dependents. Again, the type of careers that are going to be open to you are really dependent upon program design. I highly recommend you ask about like different outcomes, like what the graduates tend to do. And then again, be aware of online programs, just because a lot of therapy careers require that in-person element. And then you're going to want to look at CACREP, CACREP down here at the bottom, or NASP, which is a school psychologist. They accredit programs, and your path will be a lot easier if you go to an accredited program because usually they have everything set up for you. They have the classes, you take the licensing exam, and you can transition into a career really easily. Industrial organizational psychology. So this is more like business psych. With a master's in this, you do more like employment, market analysis. These individuals work in HR. They do team training or executive coaching. This is IO Psych, both at the master's and doctorate level, and I'll talk about that in a second, is definitely one of the more lucrative things that you can do with a degree in psych. You at the doctorate level do a little bit more statistics than your average psychologist might. So just keeping that in mind as well. But yeah, you basically would handle sort of like the person aspects of operating a business. Some IO psychologists do like business design, so they like look at like satisfaction of the employees, the design of the office, that kind of thing. Go. Okay. So, moving from the master's to the doctorate, this is where you get highly specialized. So this is also the place where, or like the degree that you would need to get if you want to be a psychologist specifically. Usually at the master's level, we call those individuals like therapists or counselors, depending on like what degree they have. At the doctorate level, that's what you need to be a psychologist, and that is a regulated term. So, within the psychology doctorate, you can focus on neuropsych, children, school settings, clinical and counseling again, industrial organizational again, behavioral psych. You can even do sports psychology or forensic psychology. And we'll talk about some of these in a moment, but these professionals tend to work either as full-time clinicians, so therapists, again, assessment, which is a big draw for the doctor, and we can talk about that a little bit more if you folks are interested, but that's basically like administering intelligence, aptitude tests, scoring those tests and interpreting the results and writing up reports. So people who need a formal diagnosis of ADHD, autism, specifically if they're seeking accommodations. Research is a big one for psychologists. You can work in academia as a professor. There are also roles for psychologists in research careers in academic medical centers. And then there's this big, like, amorphous term called industry, where psychologists can work in settings for like Google or Facebook, doing sort of market research or like research on like users. Um, there is a little bit more stats in the research and industry ones. So like really focusing on the statistic skills versus therapy and assessment tend to lean a little bit more towards like clinical skills. However, at the doctorate level, research is primary. So in order to get into a program, doctorate program in psych, and to get through a doctorate program in psych, you need to be somewhat interested in research. Okay, so clinical versus counseling. I've touched on this a moment ago, but clinical is more like severe, the term we call it severe psychopathology. So mental health issues that cause like a huge disruption in somebody's life. Um, tends to follow the medical model, so focusing on the pair of diagnosis and treatment, versus counseling, which tends to focus a little bit more on everyday stressors. They follow more of the holistic or developmental models. So basically, like what's going on in this person's life, what are like the cultural factors associated with what's going on with them. Um, if you do a doctorate program in clinical or you do a doctorate program in counseling, as long as it's APA accredited, and that's the American Psychological Association. As long as it's accredited, it will prepare you to be a licensed psychologist. So it doesn't matter if you do clinical or counseling, the end license is the same. The programs tend to last 5 to 8 years, which is why I'm going into my 5th year. Includes dissertation. You do an internship. The way that I like to describe it is like doctors do their residency. Doctors do the residency after they graduate. Psychologists do what we call internship. It's before we graduate. It's a year. You apply. You do a whole like national match. You move again, and usually you do like a postdoc associated with that. But you have to do that and collect hours throughout that experience in order to graduate. So with a doctorate in clinical or counseling psych, you can do therapy, assessment, research, or industry. It is arguably the most flexible of the psychology doctorates, which is why those programs tend to be the most competitive. And then after getting a doctorate in clinical or counseling, you can specialize further. So you can do neuropsych, which is more of the assessment. So ADHD, autism assessments, that kind of thing. Sports psychology, clinical pharmacotherapy, which is a new burgeoning field. So after you get your doctorate in clinical or counseling, you go back and get a master's, and that will license you to, in some states, to prescribe medications. Or you can do forensic, which has been in the news lately. The whole like Johnny Depp, Amber Heard thing. Forensic psychologists were all over that case, basically testifying for different clients on the stand. There's a heavy assessment lean on that one too. So you do the assessment and then you testify to the results of the assessment in a legal setting. Oh, and I just talked about this. Okay, great. All right. So sometimes people talk about like, do I want to do a PhD or a PsyD? You in IO Psych, you would do a PhD. So for IO Psych, it's a 3 to 6 year doctorate degree. The APA only accredits clinical and counseling psych, so you could do an IO Psych in any setting or any university. Sometimes you get licensed as an IO psychologist when you're in a particular state. Sometimes you don't. And then you do a lot more data analysis and statistics. The main difference for most of these is between the master's and the doctorate is research. Research is the primary in any doctorate. You could also get a doctorate in school psychology. You can get a master's in school psych. You can also get a doctorate. Again, it's 5 to 8 years. These will be APA accredited, so you will need to pass all of the same exams. You typically work in schools, so you work with school children. You do school counseling. There's a huge assessment emphasis in these programs as well, because these students need to sometimes get like school accommodations because they have ADHD or some kind of mental health struggle that's impacting their schoolwork. You also do like program design for like special like remediation plans for children. So if they need those accommodations, they need those special classes, you'll make those plans. For what it's worth, school psychologists are very much in demand. We need them everywhere, all the time. Okay, so for picking programs, in especially at the doctoral level, what you're going to want to look at is accreditation first and foremost. Is the accreditation going to get you to what you want to do? If you want to be a licensed psychologist, you're going to need APA accreditation. Do not be flexible on this. Just go to an APA accredited program. There are tons of them. Also look at cohort size. I would highly personally, like when I was applying to programs, I was really looking for the smaller the program, the better. Um, Particularly with some of these programs, they can get pretty high in terms of the cohort size, like 100. I would definitely recommend the lower the better. My own cohort is 7 people, and that's considered to be pretty high for my program. We have another cohort in my program that's like 3 people. So the reason why you want cohort size to be very small, or at least as small as possible, is the individual attention. If you're learning to do therapy, someone's watching your tape. If there are 100 people in your class, they're not watching your tape, or they're watching it very, very infrequently. If there are 3 people in your class, they're watching it and they're giving you feedback, and you're improving. Um, you also want to look at attrition. So basically how many people drop out of a program. We don't like attrition. If people are dropping out, that means that the program is not adequately supporting them. We want to see 0 attrition, if not very close to that. What kind of licensure you could get, and in particular, what the percentage of graduates get licensed. You'll find this on the program's website. The term you want to search is like whatever program, and then the words are like student outcomes. If a program is APA accredited, they have to publish their licensure rate. This is basically the percent of people who graduate from the program who pass the EPPP, which is like the big exam. You want as close to 100% as possible, because if you want to be a clinician, you need a license to do that. And if the graduates of this program aren't being licensed to do that, like that's a problem for you. If you want to go into research, it doesn't really matter as much, just as long as it's a very strong research program. But again, it just depends on what your goals are. You also want to look at funding. Nobody told me this until way too late, but doctorates are free. Or they should be very close to free. That most programs, most APA accredited programs will pay for you to go to their program. They'll pay your tuition, and then they set you up with a TA-ship or an RA-ship. And they'll pay you on top of that. It's not a lot of money. Just for like full transparency, before I was on the F-31 grant, I was a TA. My program paid for my tuition, and then because I had a master's degree, I think my salary was like 24,000. And then I got health insurance. So it's not like amazing money, but it's free, which is nice. And then lastly, I want you to think about format, making sure that you're like, if you're wanting that clinical training, that you're getting as much hands-on in-person experience as possible. I know that the field has pivoted to offering online therapy, which is great, but like a lot of training programs really want to see people in person, especially if you're doing internship or going for jobs. They still want that training in person, so making sure that you're able to get those opportunities. Okay. I tried to keep it quick. I can go back. I can talk about any more. I can talk about things at the bachelor's level, which I know is not explicitly in the blurb, but I can talk about that. I don't know. What are we thinking? Any questions, comments?
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. If you have I did have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering kind of like what got you inspired to go on your path, and like are there any strong influential role models that you've had on your journey?
Mm. Um, what got me inspired to go on my path? Let's see. Um, I think it was, if you look on like oftentimes like big, like the CDC, for example, and I haven't looked recently, and I know that things are kind of scary over there right now, but like usually, especially a few years ago, if you look on the CDC, or if you look on like various health related websites, and they give you like prevalence rates. They're like, oh, like prevalence of like this particular disorder in this particular population. If you look at Pacific Islanders, if it's not aggregated with Asian Americans, there's often like a little asterisk and it's like sample size too small to report. And it's basically like, we don't know, right? Like what's the suicide rate of Pacific Islanders and age like 40 and over? We don't know. What about like this particular like substance use disorder? And I'm just kind of making things up, but like often when you try to look up this information, it's just not available. And so that's why I like that was sort of like my like the reason why I went back for a doctor in particular is that we don't have a lot of information. And I'd like to contribute to that because if we know what the prevalence looks like or we know what people are struggling with, it gives us an opportunity to help, but we have to know. And we just don't a lot of the time, and it's really painful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I see that a lot where it's the asterisk, too few to give any
Hmm.
stats. So I was wondering, are you doing any kind of research along those lines, kind of during this PhD process? Could you
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that work? And yeah.
totally. So like I said at the top, I have an F-31, which is like an NIH research grant for doctorate students. My F-31 is focusing on historical trauma and suicide and substance use in Pacific Islander adults. It's a mixed methods study. So, in part one, we're doing focus groups where we're asking people about like experiences with these things in the community. One thing I really like about like mixed methods research is that I feel like it really gives uh, minoritized communities an opportunity to like really participate in the research process. So what's been cool is that I've been able to partner with various community organizations. I have what we call is a community advisory board. So people who are active in their own communities who I like meet with and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about asking people. Like, what do you think about this? And it kind of goes through like series of people who like researchers don't often talk to, right? They just kind of like come up with whatever questions they want to ask. And they're like, I'm just gonna ask people. So what's cool about this process is that I come up with my questions and I take them to the community advisory board, and then they come back to me and they're like, don't ask it like this. That's stupid. And I go, okay, I won't ask it like this. That was stupid. And then I get to ask people questions and we get to talk story. And, then what we do is like we record the sessions and then I go through and I code them. I come up with themes and then I use the themes that come up with what people have told me to do a broader or like bigger quant study. So then we come in and we like use measures based off of the themes that we found in the focus groups. I'm going to try to collect a bunch of like quant data, so like survey data. And then I've promised the government that I'm going to use structural equation modeling, which is advanced statistics that I'm not very strong in, but I will learn because I said I would. So that's the plan. That's the research I'm doing.
Nice. Thank you. I was wondering, you talked about some of the research on like the populations. Are you looking at kind of Pacific Islanders like in Hawaii, across the United States, in Rhode Island, everywhere? Yeah.
Everywhere. Well, because w- uh, I'm trying to keep my inclusion criteria as broad as possible. We're a very hard population to sample for obvious reasons. There's not a lot of trust. It's so funny because I was like trying to recruit for my study, and I told my auntie on Maui, I was like, Auntie, please like talk to your friends, like disseminate this flyer. And so she was talking to her friends, and they were like, oh, we've seen it. We just didn't think it was real. Dang it. Um, there's a lot of mistrust, which I get. I get. Um, So like we're hard to sample. And so, a lot of it's like building partnerships with community members and like different organizations and like meeting with people. And so I'm trying to keep it as broad as possible. It's any Pacific Island or adult in the United States, pretty much. In Hawaii, on the continent, doesn't matter.
I think we do have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Um, some messages. But the question is about, do you have any advice or experiences with culture-based approaches to psych in graduate school?
Mhm.
Um, and kind of like advice with gap years before applying and building
Cool.
up the resume.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll start at the top. Cultural experiences or culture-based approaches to psychology. Yeah. Um, not for Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders, really. Um, I think that like the APA did a survey a couple years ago, and I'm gonna have to look that up. Don't quote me, but I think it was like 0.01% of all licensed psychologists are Pacific Islander. Like it was so tiny. Um, so like in terms of like the people who are like university professors doing research with Pacific Islanders, I know of two. Um, so like they're doing great work. I can share their names if you like, if they're interested in looking at them and applying to them. Um, but most of the like culture-based clinical work being done is with other populations. So my mentor, who I worked with at URI, she just actually moved to Arizona, does culturally based work with First Nations communities in Canada. Particularly for substance use, her work is really cool because she goes in and she's like, hey, I have a bunch of money, like um you guys like get to design a like substance use treatment that you think is going to be really helpful for your community. I'm just going to serve as like, a consultant for you, if you want to know like what science previously said or like what has previously worked, like you can ask me, but like here's the money, you folks design it. I trust you to like, you know what's best for your community, so you guys take the lead and I'll just like hang out if you need me, which is like a really cool way of doing it. And you get some really awesome results, right? Like when you're working in collaboration with people who really know their communities, and really know what their communities need, and you're not going in with a specific agenda of what you think that they need, um, you get some really great like culturally informed treatments. And so that's the kind of work that she's currently doing. And so you find that in some settings, and I can share some specific names if your student is interested. um, I know that, or at least I heard that, if they want experience with Ho'oponopono, I think that happens more at the internship level. There's Waianae Coast, I think, that offers Ho'oponopono to their psychology interns. And then, okay, they're planning on taking a gap year. Advice on how to build a resume. Yeah, it's competitive. It's, I think, amongst the most competitive doctorate programs. If that's what they're going for. If they're going for the master's, it's a little bit less competitive. At the doctoral level, it's really brutal. So to be competitive for a clinical psychology doctorate program, the general advice is that you need 2 years of post-bachelor's research experience, preferably with leadership roles. So, like running a team, doing statistical analysis. Ideally, they would have posters. Publications are great. A lot of people have them when they're applying, but I don't think necessarily required. Um, so, 2 years of research, posters and pubs, leadership roles. Um, People disagree on whether the GRE matters. My GRE was terrible. I still got offers, um, even from programs that asked for my GRE. Um, yeah, it's really about the research experience. They're gonna want to have a 3.5 or higher in terms of GPA. Um, and a really good statement. Clinical and counseling psych programs are what they call the mentorship models. So it's like instead of getting admitted to a program, you apply to an interview with a specific professor. And so you're not really applying to the program, you're really applying to the person. And so they're really going to want to like tailor their statement to the specific people that they're applying to. They'll probably have to apply to about 10 to 15 programs and try not to be restricted by geography. If you're restricted by geography, it gets really tough. I can talk about any of that at any point. They can also email me um, if they need help because it's tough. It's really tough. I'll put my email in the chat.
Awesome.
I I love looking at application materials. I love it. I don't know why. Just really love it.
Nice. Um, I was wondering if you could talk about like a typical day in your life. Like, what does a
It's so difficult.
PhD do?
Um, well, okay, I have a toddler. So my day is bonkers. My day usually starts at 5 a.m. with her kicking me in the face. So I don't think that's going to be like generalizable to everybody. It really varies. It varies by year, and it varies by like life circumstance, obviously. Um, Typically, a day is a combination of classes, research, and clinical work, usually in very quick succession. So I would have like a client first thing in the morning, then I would have class, then I would try to squeeze in some research, then I got to eat something, then I have maybe another class, then I maybe have another client, and then I go home, eat dinner, and then get back to like trying to write something, either classwork or research. It's bonkers. It's 11 o'clock at night and I'm doing this. So that should give you some idea.
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving your time for us. Um, I just had one last question. So if anyone else has questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. But I guess my last question was like, thus far in the master's PhD realm, like what was kind of the biggest challenge or obstacle that you got through?
I don't think I'm ever going to be through it, but time management, time management is so rough. Especially when you're like switching from task to task to task. You're expected, it's so much writing. Like they don't tell you how much writing it is, but it's like, your school work requires writing. Like you don't really have tests anymore. You just have like big papers and projects. Um, Clinical work requires a lot of writing because you're doing like notes or you're doing like big reports on clients. And then research is just like 95% writing. So you're just constantly writing. And I still am like figuring out like how to do that effectively, like how to stay on top of all of the writing that I have to do. Um, yeah, and then like eat and spend time with my family. It's hard. I don't think I'm honestly like as we're sitting here, I'm like, oh, I have to do this and this and this and this and this. And I probably should have had that done yesterday and I have to review this other thing. So I'm not sure if I'm through it. I'm gonna be honest.
Does it get better in the postdoc era
I don't
phase or?
know. I'm not there yet.
Okay.
But I also was one of those people that had a baby in grad school. So other people who did not have a baby might be doing great right now. And I could have been doing great right now. I have no idea. But I have a child. So um I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I could have like more positive news.
No, it's good. We're getting the real story here.
If you can avoid it, baby's really going to hurt your productivity.
But yeah. Um, if there's any other questions, feel free to
Yeah.
message it now. Alana, do you have any other closing remarks? Yeah.
No, I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything. If you have particular goals, I mean, you've got a little time if you want to come off mute and talk about like why you're here, what you want to do or whatever, like we can talk about that. I love meeting people. I love chatting about grad school. It's my whole life right now. So if you have goals that, you're trying to achieve, let's talk about it. I'm here. Let's
Nice.
go. Baby's asleep. If she wakes up, she wakes up.
All right, thank you again for joining us. And I'll stop the recording. So if anyone else wants to like talk and chat, we'll be here as long as Alana wants to
Hmm.
stay here.